Now for something a little different. So we are all patients, either now or in the future, without exception. So we should all care about this. The title of this talk is DEI in Science and Medicine, Missing Metrics and Measures. That's going to be a theme that will come up in the slides a little while from now. I use slides because I'm a doctor, and I think they'll also be entertaining for you. Woke infiltration of American medicine is complete. How did that happen? When did that happen? It happened in two ways, gradually and then suddenly. The mostly peaceful, that's in quotes, Black Lives Matter, summer of 2020, poured gasoline on a process that had been occurring gradually for 15 years. Sweeping ideological dogma was accompanied by stunningly swift implementation. Here are some highlights. The modus operandi is to capture the accreditors and indoctrinate the young. The American Association of Medical Colleges is a lavishly funded lobbying organization, overwhelmingly left-centric in Washington, D.C., that controls everything. The admissions tests, applications to become a resident, the Liaison Committee on Medical Education, which is the accrediting body for all U.S. MD granting medical education programs. This is what they believe. Medical students should be able to describe these things, and you can read these for yourself, but it's all about social justice and disparities and climate change, and it applies to students, residents, and faculty. We're clearly in a new era when the president of this organization can say, we believe that DEI deserves as much attention as the latest scientific breakthroughs. And yes, they did actually say that. Folks, it's not just the Yanks. This is from 2025. We are in 2025. This is a medical education project from the Royal College, which talks about a vision for medical practice, which is rooted in all of these things and seeks to center values such as anti-oppression, etc., rather than medical expertise. So one of the techniques to do this is to discredit and eliminate meritocratic standards. Lower the admission standards because testing is racist. Everybody knows that. So more than 40 medical schools have either dropped, waived, or de-emphasized the MCAT. You have scholarships, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, limited to certain demographic groups, which is against the law, and drastic changes in government funding. So these are data from a while ago, and their reason for it being a while ago is that this organization no longer publishes any data, so you can't do these analyses anymore. But I just bring your attention to the three sets of bar graphs: low, medium, and high scores for getting into medical school. And just for simplicity and speed, let's just focus on the bar graphs on the left. If you are Black or Hispanic, your chances of getting into medical school in the United States with a lousy score are dramatically higher than if you are white or Asian. How we select medical students has been changed. We have holistic application reviews. Faculty are instructed, it's the journey, not the destination. They are told to discount or ignore MCAT scores and many of the licensing examination scores that would allow us to figure out who are the really good resident candidates and who are not. They're all pass-fail. This journal has been completely co-opted by the left. This is an august publication. It was at one time the source of truth, and this is what it has become. And these are just three headlines that I want to illustrate, and they're all contemporary. Racists like me. Climate justice, you may not realize that this is a part of medical practice, but it is, and it's what our residents are being trained in. And of course, they're defending everything that they've done for the past 15 years. This did not occur by accident. It required an army of administrators. So the growth of healthcare administrators has been exponential. And DEI administration in particular has grown dramatically. Again, these figures are very closely guarded, and you will not find out a lot about them with regards to DEI funding at medical schools. This is from the University of Michigan, and they went from 0 to some very high number in a relatively short period of time. We have also changed dramatically in the United States how research is funded and what research is funded. So these graphs correspond to biological sciences, computer sciences, geosciences. This is NSF data. The NIH data look the same. There's been an exponential increase in grant funding that includes terms like equity, diversity, inclusion, etc. And you might ask yourself, what does that have to do with geosciences? I'm not sure. In any event, in March of 2024, I published an article because I couldn't really live with myself without saying anything about this, that had this title, "The End of Merit in Med Schools Will Be Deadly." This was published in a journal called Illegal Insurrection. I asserted that the practice of medicine has to be based upon merit. It can't be any other way. I used the analogy of drug development. My academic work is doing clinical trials. A new drug works or it doesn't. It gets subjected to testing before it can be given to people. We have to learn what it can do. Our drug development process is the envy of the world, the entire world. And in order to continue marketing a drug, you have to collect data to ensure that the benefits are durable and reproducible. It's meticulous and unforgiving. Nothing is taken for granted. All assumptions are designed to be falsifiable. Impressionistic feelings don't count. And in the article, I questioned this program, which still exists, which is a program designed to admit underrepresented minorities to Penn Med if they complete a relatively simple set of requirements: 2 summers of research, a decent GPA, a decent SAT. They don't have to take the MCAT. They get a big scholarship and a stipend. This program is overtly illegal. Within hours, I would say almost minutes of that article being released, I received the first of several summonses to DEI Central, which is no longer called DEI, it's called Belonging at Penn. I had 2-hour-long meetings with the lead DEI dean. And I'll talk in a moment about what I asked. I asked some questions that were considered, I guess, impertinent, and they weren't going to answer them. But also within days of the article's publication, I met with my lachrymose division director and her equally choked up fellowship program director, who said, "How could you? You should have let us read this article before you published it," etc. And they went on to remove me from a job that paid for 20% of my salary. So now I get to do pro bono advising of the fellows, but I no longer get paid for it. So this program, why does it exist? Well, I think it's obvious why it exists, but it's existed for a while, and it has educated and admitted more than 200 students since 2008, which is a reasonable sample size for analytical purposes. Here are some of the questions that I asked. They were never answered. What are the dropout rates? What are the pass rates on the various licensing exams? Are they working as doctors, or do they have administrative roles? How many of the identity admits are participating in the discovery of new knowledge? Are they competing for grants? Are they publishing? And the last item has to do with racial concordance, which I'm going to talk about in some detail in a moment. But I want to know how many of them are treating patients in their communities, which is one of the explicit goals of having this program. The program has not gone away. This is what the past program now looks like on the Penn website. It's just a little misleading, I think, featuring, as it does, 3 Asian women. So my plea in the article was very simple. Any changes in the way that we educate young physicians should be subjected to exacting requirements as we do for new drugs. We owe it to our patients and we owe it to the world because we are the drug development engine for the entire planet. We have to attract the best minds. We cannot do it through a diversity program. So now that I had effectively doxed myself, Amy and I went on to co-author a book chapter entitled DEI in Science and Medicine, Missing Metrics and Measures. This book was released to the public on July 29th. I think they've given up summoning me to offices to account for my sins. But in any event, this particular chapter was stimulated by the utterly mindless and repeated citation of 3 iconic articles that are front and center of every single DEI presentation. And despite the fact that each of these has been refuted in peer-reviewed journals with meticulous and thoughtful analysis, they continue to be cited. This is the DEI academic trinity. Something called the Oakland study, which I'll talk about in a moment. The now notorious Florida newborns study. And finally, 3 studies published by McKinsey. And the references are here if anybody is interested, including at the bottom, the references for the refutations. So let's start with the Oakland study. What was it? Black men were recruited from black barbershops, and when they arrived, they were shown a computer tablet with a male doctor's name and photo, black or white. And they were told to select which preventative services they would be willing to accept. Invasive things like blood tests, non-invasive things like measuring your BMI. Black patients in this study chose more preventive services, especially those that were more invasive like blood tests, from black physicians compared to those who saw white physicians. This study is fatally flawed. It has been refuted several times. There was no control group, which would have to be a group consisting of white patients faced with the same test conditions. The population they studied was not representative. It was healthier than the average black patient. But most important, they made unjustified and extravagant, indeed risible, logical leaps and extrapolations, projected lifetime health benefits on mortality over 50 years from a single point in time hypothetical intervention. The Florida newborn study is worse. So Florida infant mortality data were examined and purported to show that when black newborns were cared for by black physicians, their mortality rate was lower. And the mainstream media breathlessly talked about this study being a key to black infant survival, black newborns more likely to die when looked after by white doctors. It erroneously, in a laughable quotation, made it into a Supreme Court decision in 2023. This study has a fatal flaw. The apparently strong benefits go away when you control for one single factor, the weight of the newborn. Why is that important? Because small newborns do terribly, regardless of who takes care of them. And one of the interesting things about this is that a group obtained under Freedom of Information some of the galley proofs for this particular article. And there were some very interesting notes, including one that said white babies did better when they were cared for by white physicians. And they left that out of the report because that was one of their findings, because as the study's lead author wrote, I'd rather not focus on this. If we're telling the story from the perspective of saving black infants, this undermines the narrative. That's not science. That's propaganda. There have been systematic reviews. They are here if you're interested. 4 out of 5 of them are completely negative. And so the question that I would ask is, do patients really want racial concordance? And I'm not sure. Because I had a patient tell me when I had stage 4 lung cancer, I knew what I needed to do. And I offer you choices like a multiple choice exam. But what she said is, find me a smart Jewish doctor. And finally, there are the McKinsey studies. The McKinsey studies assert and are cited over and over again as supporting the notion that, in fact, we would have landed earlier on the moon if only we had been more diverse, etc. So diversity is our strength. Is that really true? McKinsey has done this 3 times in 2015, 18, and 20, with 3 reports describing a correlation between profits and racial and gender diversity. They rank large public firms and put them in the top or the bottom quartile. I think an anodyne AI Google summary summarizes this best, and basically this is what the search terms for McKinsey come up with on the first 20 pages of a Google search. These reports consistently indicate a positive relationship, etc. That is not true. So this has been looked at by a number of people using meta-analyses and quasi-meta-analytic approaches, and they've pointed out, number one, correlation is not causation. The conclusions have never been independently validated or replicated, and the proponents never go on to cite a far more detailed, extensive, and nuanced literature, and some of those references are at the bottom of this slide. And as a result, there are dozens of published studies showing that there's either no significant or negative or, not surprisingly, mixed effects on productivity for age, gender, and cultural backgrounds. So these are the questions that I think we should always be asking for all of these studies. What are the metrics, measures, and deliverables? What exactly are we trying to do? And how will we show or be able to show that we've done it? And once the intervention has occurred, will we look backwards to see if the goals were accomplished and were health outcomes improved or were they degraded? And what are the methods? Are they unbiased and rigorous? And are there plans for replication before widespread acceptance and implementation? So this is one of the replication failures of modern American or worldwide science. A lot of stuff is just not or never can be replicated. Is it getting better? No. These are recent data on 2024 matriculants. So these young men and women are studying to become doctors as we speak. Accepted Black applicants, sadly, have lower average MCAT scores than white or Asian students at all but one school. 13 of these schools accepted Black students with average MCAT scores that were lower than the score of the average rejected Asian or white applicant. And at 2 of the schools, Black applicants were 10 times likelier to be accepted than were Asian and white applicants with similar grades and scores. The AAMC, as I told you a moment ago, no longer publishes MCAT scores by race. Are there any solutions? I don't know. I think complete transparency would help. We are all patients, or we're going to be. We need to tell patients what we're doing and explain why. We need to collect data. We need to publicize what's being done, and we need to look at the outcomes. And I'm just beginning to wonder, as these organizations, these accrediting organizations systematically degrade themselves, whether we're going to need alternative credentialing certification schemes for the benefit of patients. We've been here before, and the Chinese systematically destroyed their scientific and medical system in 1967. They have recovered because they're incredibly intelligent and resilient, but it was a genuine tragedy. There is only one standard for doctors and scientists, in my opinion: excellence, because excellence benefits everyone. Thank you.
Comment before we take Q&A. Going back to the infant study, the racial concordance study, the reason why controlling for birth weight made the differences in outcomes disappear is because, and this should not be surprising, low birth weight infants with problems upon birth are more likely to be taken care of in tertiary care centers, and the doctors there are more likely to be white. So white doctors tend to take care of low birth weight babies who are more likely to die, and so it looks like you're worse off being taken care of by a white doctor. But if you factor in that you're more threatened by death or other disability as a baby, you tend to go to a white doctor, then that explains it. And, you know, a guy named Robert Verbruggen at the Manhattan Institute, this sort of quant who does a lot of these reanalysis, he published a paper in PNS with a co-author in which he said, leaving this out just invalidates the whole study. It's one study. It's shoddy, it's poorly designed, and we should not be basing a whole revision, a revolution in the way that we design our medical education establishment based on one fatally flawed study. And yet that is really what is happening right now in the United States. So.
Questions?
My question goes to Dr. Amy. So it's for your talk, not this one. First of all, thanks for being a champion of free speech. And I would like to ask you, how do you respond to those who think that the anti-Semitism that you mentioned is not being being imported, but manufactured by the United States government? Not only because the majority of the protesters, not only on campus, but also off campus, are not Muslims. And also because the United States government is helping and allowing the Israeli government to commit genocide and war crimes.
Well, I mean, the first contention, has truth to it. I mean, a lot of the protesters they're heavily female. They are far left, woke people who are very anti-Israel. But I think that there's a very heavy multicultural element here. They are doing it partly for the sake of, what is considered the oppressed class of, Palestinians, Gazan residents. There is a significant component of foreign students who do participate. And of course, some of them have been in the news. And I think there is also, I'm sorry to say, and a lot of this is suppressed by the mainstream media. If you do take surveys of the attitudes of, third world students, they are very negative. They are very pro-Palestinian. They're very pro-Gazan, and they do display some anti-Semitic, attitudes. I'm not letting the Americans off the hook, but I don't think it's the only thing that's going on. The second is a very big issue of, who is putting the Israelis up to what they're doing. I mean, my opinion is the Israelis are under existential threat. All right. The Hamas, the Palestinians, the Gazans, they overtly say, we want to wipe you off the earth. We want you to disappear. They say it. I mean, when people say that they want to kill you, you should believe them.
Hey, but the Israelis do it to them.
The Israelis are doing it defensively.
Yeah, it's not defense to kill babies and kids.
So I'm sorry, but if you
Shall I just come back to you and just come back to you in a bit?
No, I really.
We are recording this side.
All I will say about this is war. And, in a war, if someone attacks you, you do your best to neutralize your enemy. And I personally think that that's allowed.
Thousands.
Hi, sorry.
Americans killed thousands of Japanese babies,
I'm sorry, that is absolutely untrue. Hamas has filmed their atrocities. Babies, the Bibas children, beaten to death by hand, put in the oven. No, and tell me, genocide? Do you think the Israeli army couldn't kill all the Palestinians? It would not take them an hour with their military might. They would not take them an hour. You are not acknowledging that the Palestinians put munitions and along with their friends in the UN underneath hospitals and schools. Literal journalists are housing the people that have been kidnapped, and you are choosing to ignore it. So anyway, I did actually have a question for you. First of all, I want to congratulate you on your suspension.
Thank you.
Good for you, because that takes some guts, because you could have easily said, oh, okay, I'll just say whatever you want and keep your job and all that. I want to actually talk about anti-Semitism as a form of racism. And how does it keep going? How does it keep going when I think everyone here can say racism is bad and we don't like it. That's fair. So I have been in the Middle East, including Israel and other countries. So what we have to acknowledge is that the anti-Semitism machine is a well-oiled machine. Can we acknowledge that? And in schools in many, not all Arab countries, little boys are taught to hate this person, hate that person, hate the Jews, keep the women oppressed, of course. And so what ends up happening? Well, if you're worried about the Jews in Israel, well, you're not worried about your GDP. You're not worried about the Chamber of Commerce. And I may also add that air aid dollars, the leaders of Hamas, which are usually not in Gaza, it's not nice there. They're billionaires. Now, I don't say a little bit. They're richer than Taylor Swift, and that is not an exaggeration. And I think everyone needs to acknowledge that as it's about money.
Valid, but I think we should try and have a question.
Yes. Okay. Yes. My question, roundabout way. When you were talking about the feminization of the schools, and you say it's not a good thing, and you're probably not wrong, but can we acknowledge that countries that have a higher status of women, have more women in power and stuff, generally have a better standard of living? Like, you consider the West, where someone like you can be a professor.
Okay, well, you're confusing cause and effect.
Okay.
I think I think it's that more affluent countries and more quote unquote advanced westernized countries, they tend to have this policy of opening opportunities to talented women. And that's been going on for a long time. The problem with that, and it's hard to oppose that, although people used to, maybe there was, some wisdom there. And when I say that, what I mean is, it's one thing to come into existing institutions, which have been formed over hundreds of years, through blood and toil, which I would say of the modern intellectual establishment and universities. It's another to come in and try to completely change them. I mean, it's hard to resist, because when you have demographic dominance, numerical dominance, then people will try to incorporate their values. I think that's what women have done, and that has not been a positive thing. Men formed the university, for better or worse. They kept women out. And the values that they enshrined are wonderful, positive values. Free expression, truth-telling, truth-seeking, scientific rigor, etc. I think for women to come in and say, well, that's oppressive, that doesn't comport with what we think the priorities should be, I think that's destructive. I fault men. I say men should have held the line on that and said, you can come in here, but you can't change anything. Yes. When what you're trying to preserve is worth preserving. See, what men would have tried to preserve is worth preserving. It is responsible for our wealth, for our advances, for our prosperity, for our outsized contributions to science, to the modern world that everybody benefits from, and they're incredibly ungrateful. There are a whole bunch of ingrates, right? And women benefit from it too.
What I find difficult to understand across the whole spectrum of the left wing is why they want to tear everything down. They want to keep beating everything up, wrecking it. Even in their own profession, you people are scientists, and you're just the left side of your professions are destroying your own profession that's taken so many years to build up. What is your opinion? Why is that happening in such a broad basis? Just the power thing, so that they could gain power and stay in government? I have a hard time understanding why it's so corrupt.
Envy is underestimated as a force in the world.
These are intelligent people. These are not stupid people. They must know they're hypocrites, right? They must.
Third world countries have, they have a lot of resentment and anger towards the West because the West has surpassed them.
I'm talking about inside your university. Why are these people?
Women, men are responsible for the vast majority of civilizational advances.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That will change in the future. Hasn't changed.
They're two genders. They both bring great things to the table, but we've changed that in our society, or trying to change it. It'll never change. It's going to come back to meme eventually, whether it's over revolution, war, whatever happens. But I'm just curious how these very highly educated, intelligent people are hypocrites, are complete hypocrites.
They've been captured by an ideology, and just being kind and gentle to them, trying to be. I think they have concluded that it's someone else's time. It's time for another group of people to get their due, and as a result, we're going to play by a different set of rules. You know, we've come a good distance. We're not all the way there yet with regards to human illness, but it's their time. And I think they're willing to jettison a lot of principles that have carried us this far in favor of overt favoritism for another group of people. Well, I think also this is another philosophical comment, and it's been touched on by a couple of speakers during the sessions. I think the experts discredited themselves. They discredited themselves, grievously wounded themselves with COVID. And they really didn't, after that, have much of a leg to stand on, because it wasn't that they got it a little bit wrong. It's that they got everything wrong. And I think their insistence that they were getting everything right, has them with egg on their face. And so when they insist that we go back to some sort of standard driven by experts, people are saying, forget about it. You people don't know what you're talking about. Let's do things differently.
That being said, I believe they knew they were doing wrong. That's my opinion. That's where I'm confused, because these intelligent people, just like you folks are, they knew what they were doing.
Some of them did and some of them didn't. I can tell you from existing inside the academy, there were a lot of true believers.
Well, I got a couple of quick questions here to change, refocus a little bit if we could today. Both for Professor Amy. The first one's quick, you'll knock it off right away. Does not the First Amendment apply to universities that accept federal funds?
No.
No?
That's not the rule.
Okay, and then the question is a little bit longer perhaps. So how long can a culture built on obvious falsehoods persist?
A very long time. By the way, on the First Amendment, I mean, the law could be changed. Congress could change the law to incorporate, you have to honor the First Amendment if you want to get federal funds, into Title VI. Title VI is the rule that says, the Civil Rights Act, if you want to receive federal funds, you can't discriminate. And that's been on the books for a long time. And that could be added too. But they're reluctant to do it because they're concerned about religious schools. Like, they want religious schools to be able to discriminate, so they haven't been able to work that out. So it's not part of the law. But yeah, I think falsehood can persist for a very long time. People, with the whole communist system went on and a lot of people suffered. Many, many people died. And the divine right of kings. I mean, the French Revolution took a long time. I'm not sure it was all a good thing either. But there you go. The peasantry and the lower classes suffered greatly. And it was an ideology that supported the system, but these people had some God-given right to be extremely wealthy while everybody else was, destitute. Ideas are powerful. Ideas have consequences, which is why I think the right conservative, the right wing in our country has very irresponsibly ignored the education system, because it all is traceable back to that. And it all starts at kindergarten, actually. K through 12 is a disaster, absolute disaster. And it's been captured by the education schools of the teachers' unions, who are far, far left. I mean, there's a lot of craziness. They're reading to 4- and 5-year-olds books like Pride Puppy and, books about pronouns and gender fluidity. They're really doing that. There was just a Supreme Court case about that, actually, Mohammed B. Taylor, where a bunch of religious parents tried to opt out of these lessons. And Montgomery County, Maryland said, oh, no, you can't do that. Too many parents want to opt out. You can't make this stuff up.
You both raised some great points, especially with DEI, which is effectively Marxism rebranded. So it's a terrible thing that is infecting our Western society and all areas of society, and both of you have been victims of that, obviously. But it's interesting to me that you say free speech should be defended, while at the same time saying anti-Semitism, where anti-Semitism is being used as a cudgel for places like the ADL to effectively remove the criticism, and sometimes legitimate, sometimes not, of Israel in general. Can you comment on how you square that peg with the, demands for free speech, but also want to eliminate criticism through anti-Semitism?
Well, I don't square it because I do not support a lot of these organizations' efforts, which I think are overly broad, to censor and suppress so-called anti-Semitism. For example, the Holocaust Committee's definition of anti-Semitism, I think is overly broad, and I don't endorse it. I think, here's my view of it. If you've got a bunch of people saying awful things about Jews and about Israel and about, how they should be wiped off the face of the earth and from the river to the sea, I want to hear it. I want to hear it. And I want to be able to act on it. I'm not going to vote for these people. If legislation is proposed to exclude people from Arab countries or very much minimize their entry to the United States or the global South, I'm going to vote for it. So without knowing what people really think, how are we going to make the proper policies? How are we going to pass the proper laws to advance the goals that we as citizens have?
Great. Dr. Wax and Dr. Cohen, thank you very much.